What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Dynasty Dumbies, your home for the latest and greatest in college football news and action. We're your hosts, Hunter and Tony, and just jumping right into things, I have to apologize to Maryland head coach Mike Locksley. I falsely reported that he was fired last week. He was not. I apologize to Coach Mike, his reputation. However, his job is definitely one of the hottest seats in the country after Maryland has now lost, I think it's 4 in a row and sitting at 4-5. But he still has a job, and I would like to apologize for that. That was bad reporting from my end.
And I think I didn't really help too much because I was the one who sent you the tweet that he had reportedly been fired. So both of our bad. We'll do better on finding our sources and making sure that it's correct.
Yes, that's on us, guys. But moving on to this next little topic here, something that honestly really interests me from a perspective of the current state of college football is that UCLA is very close to finalizing leaving the historic Rose Bowl Stadium for SoFi Stadium as their new place for home games. And I just think that this is a massive, massive L for them.
I'm not a I'm not a fan of it. I think it's stupid. I think the Rose Bowl holds so much history and prestige when it comes to college football.
Oh my gosh,
For it to just kind of be tossed to the side to go to a massive new gen stadium in SoFi and a team that's can't even fill out the Rose Bowl. So I don't think they're going to do anything close to SoFi. The professional teams can't even fill out SoFi.
It's, to me, you're just moving to a soulless arena that has no personality, no life, no attachment. And honestly, I don't want them to leave the Rose Bowl, but I do see half of the picture is that they have two issues right now with their stadium. A, it's not that close to campus. And B, it's too big. UCLA football is not what it used to be. They cannot fill the Rose Bowl. I understand that. I understand you want something maybe closer to the stadium. SoFi doesn't fix either of these things. It's just as far, if not farther, from the stadium. And the size is bigger. So you're just going to have a more empty arena. It's going to look terrible. It's just not going to be a fun environment. Students aren't going to want to go out there. And I saw an interesting conversation on Twitter of it also takes away the tailgating aspect of UCLA football. From all accounts, I've heard it's pretty fun tailgate culture there. SoFi doesn't have that. It's just an endless parking lot. You're just going to an NFL stadium there. I just don't understand leaving the Rose Bowl for something that doesn't fix either of your biggest problems. There's been a lot of talk of them maybe renovating the on-campus practice facility they have into a 35, 40,000 person arena, which I think would honestly be great for them. Students would be able to walk right in. You can fill the stadium. It's on campus. It fixes both of your needs. Sucks leaving the Rose Bowl, but I do understand it from the current state of the program. It's just a lot more, but moving to SoFi to me is just not the solution.
It would make more sense, like you had said, if they somehow found a way to renovate that practice field into some form of a stadium, whether it's a 30, 35, 40,000 capacity. Sometimes bigger is not always better, especially when it comes to some of these, college teams where you're not always getting a sold out game. It's unless you're, Deep South SEC where they just have, these massive schools that it's pretty easy to fill and stuff like that, or like a JMU where they're constantly selling out and stuff like that. It would make a little more sense. But I just saw another report of Rice. They're getting a new stadium. They're renovating theirs, and it's actually going to be smaller than their current stadium.
Just like what Northwestern is doing.
Exactly, which is fine. You're a smaller team. Smaller means usually fuller. So if you don't have that consistent fan base that's going to get you 50,000 plus, a week where you can, maybe get a 30,000, that's fine. It makes it look a little more full if you feel a little closer to the fans and the environment.
Just a better
I think
game
it would
day atmosphere too.
Exactly, and especially with it being on campus.
On campus is the way to go for college football, in my opinion. As someone who's went to a school in JMU who, from my freshman dorm room, I could walk outside and hit our stadium with a rock or tennis ball. There's nothing better than having it on campus in the center. It makes it so the game day atmosphere so much better. I just don't understand moving it to a soulless place like SoFi, even though it's state of the art, it's great, this and that. Just doesn't make sense to me. It's like UNLV playing at the stadium in Vegas. I'm blanking on the Raiders stadium name right now,
Allegiant.
but Allegiant, thank you. Obviously, it's convenient for UNLV, but man, they don't fill that. It's too big. It's a money thing. I get it. It's just sad to see.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of these college teams playing off campus, playing in these professional stadiums like Miami, USF, and whatnot. So it's fine, but it's one of those things that could end up hurting them a lot more than helping them, in my opinion, moving into something like a SoFi when they don't even have it all to begin with in the Rose Bowl. And I think the Rose Bowl was more than likely bringing in more fans because it was the Rose Bowl, especially for the away teams, being like, oh, we can go to the Rose Bowl and see them.
It's a
now it's like exactly. Now it's just like, oh, we're going to SoFi. I don't really feel like it.
Yeah, it's upsetting to see. I hope it doesn't come true, but like all good things in college football, it's probably going to be dying. Moving on to this next topic, which has been really big in conversations of late with, like we were just talking about, the current state and landscape of college football, is that the Big Ten executives are pressing to make a $2.4 billion, with a B, investment deal, and it's potentially going to be without Michigan and USC. We've talked about this some in our previous episodes, so make sure to go check them out. But the Big Ten is pursuing a private capital investment, which will be from an external investor, reportedly in the investment arm of Cal University's pension system. And they would acquire approximately a 10% stake in this newly formed Big Ten entity, which would be called Big Ten Enterprises, that would hold the league's future media rights and other commercial assets. It would be a groundbreaking change for college football to have a private investment firm buying any part of a conference and holding these rights to it. It's groundbreaking stuff, and it's just the current state of college football with NIL and how money is being used to power collegiate athletics.
It's crazy to think that we've gotten to this point where it's a possibility that there's potential private equity in college football, where just less than 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and that probably wasn't even something anyone would have thought of. And now all of a sudden we're getting a deal of possible $2.4 billion getting thrown into the Big Ten, where they'll have basically control of everything. And who knows what that would do to the conference as a whole? Is that the domino that pushes that whole rumor of Big Ten and SEC wanting to do their own thing because they think they're so much better than everybody, and possibly just completely destroying the landscape of college football as we know it as a whole. But the positive, I guess you could say, in this is that when you had said Michigan without Michigan and USC, is that they're the ones that are pushing back on this, saying that the trustees have raised concerns about selling equity in a university asset, whether the deal addresses the underlying cost pressures in college athletics, and whether the deal terms treat programs fairly. Because, who's to say that Ohio State doesn't get more because they're Ohio State, compared to a smaller team than the Big Ten, like a UCLA. I mean, you get something like that where it's like, well, Ohio State's bringing in the money, so they're going to get, 150 million. UCLA, you're only going to get like 10.
It's crazy. And another question this raises is about how partnering with a private investor can or may conflict with a nonprofit mission of public universities. And this gets into bigger topics than just college football, but tax exemption statuses, how you have to file certain things. This goes very deep. And it's very interesting to see Michigan and USC push back on this, having those concerns about selling essentially a part of their brand to a private equity firm that they don't have any control of. Two things that we do know about this deal is that each school would receive roughly $135 million from California or University of California Investments, who would be putting, doing the $2.4 billion infusion. So the thought is that you get this company to give all this money to all the Big Ten teams. Those teams can do a lot with $135 million. Think of how much more players they can buy, stadium renovations that we were just talking about. Just from the ground up, it is a game-changing amount of money. I would shit a brick if someone offered JMU $5 million, let alone 135. But this also extends the conference grant of rights, which is essentially their agreement to stay within the conference till 2046. It's a 10-year extension from 2036. It's mind-boggling to think about. And again, this deal is not finalized, but to see Michigan and USC push back, I do think I can't believe I'm saying this, but I mean they're kind of the heroes to me. I think the current state of college football is too fragile to make this sort of deal. Things are, from the NIL era now that we're in, things are so up in the air that something like this, you can't turn the clock back. Once this happens, it's happening, and you're going to see the SEC do it. You're going to see every other conference do it. The ACC recently just renegotiated its kind of tiered payment system with TV rights because Clemson and FSU are so unhappy about these new teams joining, where instead of it being, a collective payout, it's a tiered payout where the teams that draw the most TV viewership get paid more. Florida State and Clemson thought they'd be walking away richer than, Richie Rich, and now they suck this year and they're not getting paid as much as other teams that are at the top of the conference. So something like this with a tiered payout, it's a slippery slope.
Absolutely, and I'm almost shocked that it's the Big Ten that's the one that's pushing this and not the SEC. This is something I'd expect to see out of the SEC because they're, that supposed to be better than everyone by 20 miles, and they think that they can, their entire conference should be eligible for the playoff and whatnot. So it's like surprised to see that it's not them pushing for something like this, and then the Big Ten's the one taking that first step into trying something like this. And I'm with you in the sense that, Michigan and USC are going to be the potential, heroes that we talk about in the future that prevented, something happening. Or if something like this does happen, we look at Michigan and USC and be like, these guys are on the right side of history. While, maybe if this happens and the Big Ten turns into something it's not and just completely blows up the entire, the whole of college football, then we could look at it as, Michigan and USC are the ones that tried to prevent this, and it just wasn't enough. So the questions are going to be asked regardless if this happens or not. I mean, it calls into question the integrity of these other Big Ten teams, especially these kind of newer ones, if they're actually fully on board with this or if they're kind of still in a gray area and they just don't know yet. I mean, like you said, if someone handed me a $135 million check for doing something like this, a lot of people are going to sign that dotted line immediately. So it brings so much to a school.
Them.
Exactly. It would bring so much to a school, but realistically, it's that typical you won, but at what cost? I mean, what does this do as a whole for the landscape where, like I said, is this the first, domino that sets off a massive just downslope of college football as a whole where, it just turns into every team wanting to do it, every conference wanting to do it, and it just turns into a shit show, basically. And then we lose the sport altogether because of just how poorly managed it is.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds, specifically with Michigan and USC. If this does get passed, they'll have a small window to agree to the, if all the other Big Ten teams agree, the Michigan USC will have a small window to agree with it themselves. If they don't, who knows what the fallout could look like. But we're going to continue to monitor this extremely closely because this is a groundbreaking sort of investment in college football. And we'll just have to see how it looks in the future.
Yeah, we're We've always been suited up for a pretty crazy offseason here, but if something like this happens even before the offseason, Lord knows what the offseason will look like when these guys have extra time on their hands and they're not worried about, current season stuff and whatnot. So this could just be the first little breeze here from a butterfly effect, and we'll just, like you said, it's gonna have to keep our eye on it and see if it actually, catches traction or if it just dies in the mud.
We will certainly see. But something that we can look at with certainty right now are our rankings for this upcoming week after the exciting weekend that we just had. So, Tony, how about you hit them with these rankings?
Yeah, our individual ones first, of course, and like always mentioning the criteria. It should be drilled inside of your head right now because we've said it every single episode. Head-to-head, of course, which is another hot topic in between the dummies this week. How much it gets weighted and whatnot. We'll discuss that maybe a little later. Weekly results, all being equal, they all matter. Zero hypotheticals whatsoever. We don't consider them. We don't like them. Vibes of teams, how they're playing, how they're doing, what we think about it. And then, of course, mentioning now the conference championship games, that losers of those will not be punished. We will not punish you for earning an extra game. That's just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And of course, we do it AP style. 5 people submit a ballot.
Mm-hmm. Best way to think of that conference championship game is if a team is within the current playoff bracket. Let's say they're sitting at number 10. They lose their conference championship game to the number 18th ranked team. They're not going to drop out of the playoff just because they lost their conference championship game. Even though they lost to the 18th ranked team, you shouldn't be punished for rewarding yourself with playing so well you get another game. And I think something and something you talked about already is this head-to-head notion that we do care a lot about, and I know you and I are probably the two of the people that, I think all the dummies hammer this pretty hard, but you and I definitely bring it up. And you brought this great point up this week about, most of this season we've talked about head-to-head when teams have the same record. Okay, Louisville, UVA have the same record. UVA is going to be ahead of them. But what happens in the scenario where two teams are ranked fairly closely, but one team is 8-1 and one team 7-2? What do you do in this? And this was a big debate this week, specifically with my JMU Dukes. And as you can see with Tony and I's rankings, we were two people who did punish them, despite them having an impressive win at Marshall. I don't care what anyone says; it's their 75th or their 75 game. It was a tough environment in Huntington. It was an impressive win. However, Louisville did lose this week. And Louisville and JMU were still going to be ranked really close, and Tony and I both agreed that JMU should still be ranked behind Louisville. Because of that head-to-head loss at Louisville, it still matters to us, and you'll see in our rankings that is reflected, and I personally think that you and I have JMU ranked the most accurately. I think we'll see here shortly in our group rankings. I love JMU, but I think our group is a little bit too high on them personally. Nothing against my Dukes. I'm just more of a realist here. But as you can see, we really did value that head-to-head win for Louisville over JMU. So JMU ended up sliding down. They're still the highest graded Group of 5 team for us, though.
Absolutely. And when I went to sit down and do my rankings, I had noticed everybody had done theirs except for Blitz. And I was talking to him about it. And I had noticed that everybody had JMU over Louisville, and I was genuinely curious on why everybody had thought that. And I asked you and Cody and Edwin specifically what your thought behind it was, because I know I've been on record saying that for me, head-to-head comes into account when they are ranked. Mm-hmm. So for me, if they are both ranked like they are, before Louisville lost this weekend, Louisville was always ahead of JMU because they had that head-to-head win. Mm-hmm. And now that Louisville had lost, while albeit they don't have the same record anymore, that head-to-head still weighs in for me because it's still that one blemish on JMU's record there.
Yep.
So to me, that just shows it. And it sucks that in games like, or in situations like this where you lose to a team and then that team ends up losing more, it makes your loss look worse in that
good
sense.
lessons
And I know
turn
that
into
gets
less
taken
good
into account.
lessons.
Exactly. And I know that gets taken into account, especially with the playoff committee, which we'll get into later, where that stuff does get taken into account. So for me, I wouldn't say it was more a punishment for JMU. It had to be done. I didn't like it. I really didn't. I honestly, they could have been further down. I kind of wanted to punish UVA and Louisville more for both losing at home to unranked teams, but I think it's pretty fair where they're at right now. Honestly, kind of being that middle of the pack sort of thing. I know Cody had questioned me moving up Texas and Oklahoma, even though they both had the bye, and it was really just a result of other people losing. That's all it was. I mean, I sat there. I did my 1 through 11. I got down to Utah, and I sat there and I stared at my screen for a good 10, 15 minutes before I decided to do
That's
anything.
where it got dicey.
It was really
for me
tough
as well this week.
Yeah, it was really tough. But I think for me, the rules are the rules. I've been on record saying if they are ranked, the head-to-head comes into play, and I think I'm pretty accurate on that so far. And
Yep,
I'm going to stick by it, even if it bites me in the butt. Where a team like Tulane, for example, where they can't be above a certain, like Ole Miss. If Ole Miss were to drop off the face of the earth and just start sucking, I can't. If they're both ranked, I can't put Tulane above them. So and it's just how it is. And the only way it could really happen for JMU now is if Louisville somehow drops out, but it would take a lot for them to drop out at this point. So it's just how it is.
I think when teams excuse me, when teams have the same record, head to head is going to matter 100% of the time. When one team has a different record, I think it can be, for me personally, it can be a little bit more case by case. If Louisville were to drop another game and have 3 losses, I would feel comfortable putting JMU, for example, in front of them. It's a case-by-case situation, though, because if, you mentioned Ole Miss. Maybe if Ole Miss drops 2 more games and Tulane still has 2 losses, I would still I would still probably put Ole Miss in front of Tulane. Obviously, that's a 1-game gap similar to what JMU's in right now. It's just a case-by-case situation for me in that, leaning towards, 80% of the time that head-to-head mattering, just depending on how close they really are in the rankings. And I think it's interesting to look at from that perspective. But looking at our top teams here, we both still have the same top 3. We've been pretty firm on these for the last several weeks. I think any of these teams are interchangeable, but they're sitting tight. For me, Texas Tech dominates BYU, and they get a big jump. They're back to 4 for me. Maybe I'm overhyping them. I think they're a really, really good team. Their defense is really good. I think they're worthy of it. I do have Oregon dropping despite getting a ranked win. I had Iowa ranked 16th last week. And you see I've dropped them off. I'm still not going to rank a 3-loss team. Iowa's a good team, but however, last week I would have dropped Oregon behind Bama, except they both were on bye, and I just couldn't rationalize that. And they just haven't looked that great, so I did drop them. BYU stays in the top 10 for me, though. They were number 4 last week. Georgia Tech jumps back in for me. They're sitting at number 9, just like they are for you. And Ole Miss, I wanted to punish Ole Miss for playing the Citadel. I told you this. I just couldn't drop them below 11, but they definitely weren't being rewarded for beating the Citadel in week, 11? No, sir.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. For me, especially these SEC teams that do it and they try to just, put that easy win on their schedule late in the season, I will never reward them for winning those. For example, Texas A&M, their second to last game is against Samford. Unless they win that game by 100, they're staying put. It's as simple as that. I mean, if they win it but don't win it handedly, and a team below them wins handedly against a legit opponent in their conference or something, then sure, they can drop, absolutely. But you can't go up, in my opinion, for playing those sorts of teams this late into the season, where we're getting to the nitty gritties. Like, I was talking to Blitz about this, that I was saying that if teams want to continue to do that, I think there should be a rule, especially if it's this late in the season, where they have to play it on the road. I think that would make it a little better in that sense.
I would love
to where
that.
the smaller
That'd be
team,
great.
the smaller team gets to host. A team like a Samford gets to host Texas A&M, who's undefeated. Possibly undefeated and stuff. Like, I think that would make it 100 times better than what we're going to see with them going to Texas A&M. It's kind of stupid, but hopefully with the 9-conference game stuff coming in soon, we see less of it. We know the SEC thinks that they can just schedule whoever they want because they're going to get in no matter what, but it's whatever at this point. But going back to the rankings here real quick, with mine, ours are relatively the same for the most part. I still have BYU in the top 10 as well. Mm-hmm. I was also considering dropping Oregon down, but honestly, I was kind of impressed with their win. I think that win that they get on the road in Iowa in typical Iowa weather was pretty impressive in my point. That was Big Ten football right there. And, the big critique with Oregon is they couldn't handle that sort of stuff. And I thought that they did fairly well, even though, like, for the most part, it did not look like they were going to come out with a win. And they edged it out. They got it done. And I got to give a shout out to their running back group where that Iowa defense was only averaging about, I think it was like 84.9 rush yards a game. Oregon almost ran for 300 on their head. So that's pretty impressive regardless, especially being a team like Oregon where, they're known for like this sort of flair of an offense where they're kind of, these nice deep plays or the good, pretty passing plays with the occasional run here and there. I would say that they're more of like I wouldn't say air raid, but they definitely lean towards that passing sort of game. And in a game where they couldn't really do that because of the terrible conditions they were in.
Was ugly.
It was. I thought it was very impressive on the road, nonetheless. And I've already said that I value those road wins, and Iowa was ranked in my book as well. So I value that road win just a little bit. I don't think it's super duper impressive, like, oh my God, they got to move back up. But I just kept them at 4. Texas Tech is literally like right there, along with Alabama as well. But notably, of course, me and you had to put the Green Wave back in. I think we both have said we think they earned it, getting a good win on the road again against Memphis, who we both had ranked 16. So they deserve their flowers. I went in after that win. I thought regardless, I was like, these guys are getting ranked at least 25. It could go higher depending on, how the rest of it falls. But I gave them 25 at least because I thought that it was a very impressive win in my book.
They were the last team clearly to enter my ranking, but they really were the last. I wanted to rank them. They clearly got a great win against Memphis. I did my initial rankings, did not have them in actually. Last week, as you know, I had North Texas in at 25. I had moved North Texas up a bit and had added Oklahoma, Michigan, and Pitt, which, side note, Oklahoma is definitely the team I think we disagree the most on, where you have them up all the way up at 13, while I just had them entering my rankings at 22. And then Michigan's another team where I have them ranked and you don't. But clearly they're in the back end. Back to the point at hand, though. I had North Texas, and quite frankly, I was okay with dropping North Texas out of the rankings despite not losing because Tulane just had an impressive win, and I couldn't think of a reason why I should keep North Texas in above Oklahoma, Michigan, Pitt, or Tulane. So I happily dropped them. They are a team that I am on the lookout for, including SMU, Wake Forest, Houston, and Iowa. I'm still watching out for. Those teams are on the outside and outside looking in for me, but I had to respect the Green Wave. They had an impressive win, and they deserve to be rewarded for beating a team that I had ranked so highly.
Yeah, I'm with you there. But to go back on the Michigan point, my initial rankings, I did have Michigan in as well. They actually were in the 24 slot where Cincinnati is at. But I remember on our last episode when we were going over our rankings, I had Cincinnati as my first team out, and seeing as how both of those teams had buys, and I didn't really have a rhyme or reason for which one, going back and seeing as how I had Cincinnati as my first one out, I was like, I'll go ahead and throw them in there because I'd had them as my basically 26 or 25B. So I was like, I'll give them the edge over Michigan for now. But Michigan would now be my first team out realistically of my 25. And then I also have Houston and SMU as well that I'd be looking at.
I agree with you. I think we'll see here in a second after you flip the page here of the tight consensus of teams that the dummies do have ranked. And I think without further ado, let's take a look at the second official Dynasty Dummies bracket here. This is the group ranking with all 5 teams. So as you can see here, let's take a look at the teams on the outside looking in right now. Texas and UVA are the first 2 out, while we have Notre Dame, Louisville, and Miami in a tight pack right behind them. Those ACC teams and Notre Dame all have some transitive wins over each other. Miami does have the win over Notre Dame, but the overall group feels like Notre Dame just has the edge, where Tony and I are the 2 dissenters. And you got Oklahoma, Vandy, USC, USF, Cincy, Michigan, North Texas, and Pitt. No Tulane, despite our rankings. Tulane was the only team in the receiving votes category with 6 this week, so they were truly the 26th team. No, there was a tight consensus of the 5 of us only ranked 26 teams. Tulane was just the odd team out. And then we had Memphis, San Diego State, and Iowa drop, while Michigan, North Texas, and Pitt entered.
Yeah, and going back on Tulane is that only one person doesn't have them ranked in Edwin. Everybody else has them 25, 24. So it's very close. Like you said, our consensus overall is that much closer, where we're getting an idea of our 25 teams and deciding our bracket. And, it's going to be just rough. I mean, each week it gets harder and harder with our group rankings, where we all sit there and look and we have our discussions on certain things, and we call each other out or ask questions about stuff, and it's interesting to see everyone's different thought process and stuff. And I think it's going to change, pretty drastically with some of these games coming up, where these teams will land, who's just squeaks in, who's just squeaking out. Let it be known, I know it doesn't matter technically in the bracket, but JMU and Texas were tied on points. But obviously JMU gets in on that 5th championship bid. And then Oklahoma and Vanderbilt were also tied for 18. But again, with our tiebreaker, Oklahoma gets the nod at 18, while Vandy drops to 9. And of course, with our bracket, that means that our bye teams, obviously, Indiana being 1, Texas A&M being 2, Ohio State being 3, Texas Tech being 4, 3 of them being their conference champions. So, possibly could see a 4-conference championship bye thing, like last year. It is very much a possibility. It just depends on, Ohio State and Indiana, how they shape up.
Yes.
And then with that, Ohio State did finally drop to 3. More people had, everybody but me and you, I believe, had Texas A&M at 2. So that gave them the edge to jump up to that 2 slot. So with that, obviously, our 5 and 12 game would be JMU traveling to Oregon, which would be
I'll go.
a crazy game. Honestly, that would be pretty crazy. That's the best part about this playoff, is that the crazy games that you can get. Our 8-9 would be Ole Miss playing Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech being that ACC, the highest ranked ACC champ right now. Being our 4th highest ranked conference champion. And then 6-11 would be Utah traveling to Alabama. And then 10-7 would be BYU traveling to Georgia. So BYU stays in despite that ugly loss to Texas Tech. But that could all change, with conference championship games, where people will fall and whatnot. I was having this discussion with Blitz. Me and him were talking yesterday a lot about our rankings and how the conference championship games will play an effect to this. And, my thought process is like you have a team like an Indiana, Ohio State. If they end up in the conference championship game and, Indiana's 1, Ohio State's 3, if Ohio State wins, I would just swap them. I mean, that's my
I would agree
thought
with that.
that's my thought of not punishing them. Like, obviously, Indiana has to drop because
I think when you
they
have
can't
a
be
conference
won.
championship game between two teams within within the playoff, I'm okay with shifting them around to account for that.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not okay when it comes to a team who's right on that outside. They like in SMU last year, they lost their conference championship game but still made the playoff as the 11th seed. To me, that was the correct thing to do. They lost their conference championship game, but I don't think you can punish them for making it there when a team like Alabama didn't make theirs and there's the dissenters crying for SEC glory. That's just not how it works. I don't think you should be rewarded for getting to play an extra game that you earned. So I do agree with
I'm
you
with you. I'm
within
100%.
that.
I'm with you.
It's a
Absolutely.
really it's a really interesting conversation. I'm 100% with you on swapping them between two top teams, but if you're on the outside, I'm not going to punish you for it. But I'll be okay with shifting rankings around. If the eighth place team loses, I might shift them down. They might not be ranked as high, but they will not drop from the playoff.
Absolutely. Like, if you put in the sense of like a good example here would be, in our bracket right now where Texas Tech, let's say Texas Tech plays BYU in the conference championship game, and then you have Utah sitting there at 11. If you're not playing in the conference championship game and you're sitting in here as an at-large bid, I really don't think you can move up much, if at all, really. I mean, because you did nothing because you didn't make your conference championship game and other teams did. So that's the whole point of not punishing them because, if I'm sitting at home doing nothing while there's two teams out playing for the conference championship where winning it, gives you that boost and that automatic bid of at least making it, while losing shouldn't knock you out completely. It should absolutely not where, you have a team like a Utah or like a BYU, like if they lost to Texas Tech again, if this was the committee, they would drop out completely more than likely. And Utah would just move up. But for me, it would come down to I would probably just leave it the same. If a BYU loses to a Texas Tech again, I'm okay with keeping them at 10. Or if possibly move down a little bit, but they're going to stay in within the top 12.
I agree with you on that. I just the conference championship game should always be a reward. That is my take on it. And looking at these rankings, I love to see the diversity within the conferences we have. We have 3 Big 12 teams, 4 SEC, 3 Big 10, and then 1 ACC, and obviously the Group of 5 representative, the James Madison Dukes. The ACC is definitely the team on the outside looking in, not just from us, but also the committee, as they don't have any of them ranked in the top 12, as we'll see here shortly. I think they still have a really good shot with, at least in our rankings, of a UVA, Louisville, and Miami, and on Georgia Tech getting a conference champion and an at-large. The committee, I don't see that possibility for them. But the diversity, I really do like to see. I really like our rankings, besides one thing, and I already mentioned it. I do think JMU is overranked. I'm sorry. I love the Dukes. I think that they can win the national title, but I do not think that they are a top 12 team in the country. I think where we have them, I think that 16 to 18 range is an accurate representation for them. And we got a little bit of bias, a little bit of love for the Dukes, which I can't complain about.
No, I'm with you there. It's the more and more I looked at it, I couldn't bring myself to put them in the top 10. And I was like, I know that they are a good team. Their defense is easily one of the best. And I think that would take them a long way in the playoff because we all know that defense wins championships. And but I just can't bring myself to give them that edge and put them into that top 10, top 12 range. And I didn't want, like I said, I almost put them down further because I almost punished UVA and Louisville even more, but I felt that would have just been a disservice to them at the same time, because it's not like they lost, like they won, on the road. And so that helps your case. It doesn't hurt your case. It helps your case. But just because of what happened earlier, in the sense that, weekly results matter, the head-to-head matters, and everything, it's just how the cookie crumbled. But I'm with you where I think it's accurate. I think that the overall group ranking is definitely a little too high. They would still be the fifth champion no matter what.
Yes.
I would think, because the closest to them is USF at 21. So they would still get in regardless. But I just don't agree with, them being as high as, as Edwin put them, as high as 9. And I think that's just way too far, way too high. I just don't agree with it.
I mentioned last week when I had them higher, I didn't feel good about it. And this week it gave me that Louisville loss did give me a little bit of a chance to course correct that a little bit. And I don't mean to disparage my alma mater, but that's just, I think, how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's not that we're trying to discredit them, because we're not. Like, if anything, we're giving them the credit where it's due. It just might be a little too much at times. And we've said it before. We said it last week where it was like, are we giving the G5 a little too much love? Possibly. But, like I had said, I think the teams that were there deserved it, and it's all about who deserves it. So, right now I think JMU does deserve it at this very moment, but I still think that number next to the name is just a little too high. But, everyone's got their reasons. I'm not going to sit here and say that, we're the stupidest people. We are dummies. We are dummies, but, to each their own. There are 5 dummies, and it comes to a collective, and that's just how it fell. So I can't discredit it too much, because it's all a collective at that rate. So,
yep. And I think we're ready to take a look here at these official college football rankings. These are the ones, as much as we think ours matter, these are the ones that do matter at the end of the day, unfortunately. Taking a look here, let's look at it. Let's look at it from the outside in again. First 2 out, Oklahoma and BYU. And then you have Utah, Vandy, Georgia Tech, USC, Michigan, UVA, Louisville, Iowa, Pitt, Tennessee, and Cincy, rounding them off, rounding them out here. Apologies for that. Misread my note. So we're looking at it from here. They still got Iowa and Tennessee ranked as 3-loss teams. I'm not going to keep beating the dead horse, but Tennessee is a threat to American freedom. That's all I'll say. I don't want to talk about Tennessee anymore. But the committee did definitely punish Louisville and UVA a lot harder than the dummies did, with a harsh drop. And then interesting note was that Miami did jump Georgia Tech in the rankings. They were 18, jumped up to 15. And looking at the top 12 here, you can see Miami is the 11th seed as the 15th highest ranked team. And from a most important perspective, I think the group of 5 is the most interesting part of the bracket right now, is that they do have USF ranked at 24, unfortunately, for me and for you. USF is in the driver's seat for this last playoff spot. And it's interesting to see, because if you look at the coaches poll, the AP poll, and if you're in the weeds like I am, where you still track the old BCS computers, JMU is the highest rated group of 5 team on all 3 of those polls, except for the committee, who puts USF at 24. I don't disagree with it. I understand. They're definitely in the driver's seat now, though, and they get that coveted last playoff spot.
It's going to be very, very interesting who can get that last spot, because you got a team like USF who has had a stellar season, and you can't discredit what they've done, but then you're looking at the sense of, like, what is the reasoning behind it, and again, with when they talk about it, they're not really giving a solid reason initially, but then in the media call insights, they had talked about that USF has been part of the talk. And then they did mention that JMU, Tulane, and Memphis are part of the talks as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a positive sign that our teams are being mentioned. And that I think that shows a lot, because even with, for me especially, even with that ugly blemish of that UTSA loss, the fact that we're still being considered, and I think it helps that the Memphis game, they get the win in the Memphis game. I think that boosts their chances drastically. Because now they could find a way into the conference championship game, and so it's going to come down to a lot of different factors. And I know we've harked on it and we don't like it, but I think more than likely the deciding factor right now between USF and JMU is probably that strength of schedule.
It definitely is.
Yeah, we know that the committee has said that they are taking these metrics into use and looking at them, dissecting them, and I think that's what's holding back JMU. We were discussing it earlier before we even started recording, where you look at the resume of JMU wise, and it's hard. You can't find that like marquee win, and when you look at a USF, they have those marquee wins. And, they blow out North Texas on the road. They get the win in the Swamp. Of course, they did get beat by Miami. And you had said it that's possibly a little more forgivable than some of the other losses. But then they do lose to a decent Memphis team. And it's just hard to decide, like, where do you, like, draw the line of, like, who is who? Do they have, like, almost like a point system that they're doing that they tally up between the teams of like, okay, this is how we're going to decide based on like do they take the average of like the strength of schedule, strength of record in both of our opinions is, still a flawed metric, but I think it's an overall better one because that actually shows how you have played and what your opponents have done as well. Like we had said with these quality lessons, like a JMU to a Louisville, where Louisville was doing so good, they get that bad loss that brings down JMU a little bit. And then, same could be said for Tulane, where right now it's looking in their favor with Duke is looking very good, where that's boosting them up a little bit because they beat Duke. And, even with Ole Miss still winning and still being a top team, that also helps Tulane because that's one of their lessons. And but then that UTSA one brings it down. Because that same UTSA team that Tulane lost to, USF beat the brakes off of the following week. So
yes.
It's one of those things that like you got. How do you weigh the options? How do you weigh all the numbers? And it's a rough decision. Do we agree with it most of the time? No, absolutely not. Because ours are better than theirs. But I would be very interested to see in how they do. Like this is the one.
It is really interesting to look at it, and you mentioned it from the media call perspective of on the media call, they did outright say that JMU's strength of schedule is something that was holding them back. You and I both agree. We think that's just a bullshit stat. Strength of record is a better one to look at, but we still aren't a huge fan of that. But strength of schedule, you just get rewarded based off of other teams' records. Notre Dame, for example, has a higher strength of schedule because they played Miami and Texas A&M. But they didn't even win those games, but they're rewarded for them. And quality lessons matter in today's era. And it is good to know that the committee's teams that they said that they're talking about was JMU, Tulane, Memphis, and USF. They mentioned North Texas, but in terms of USF strength of schedule. Now, that doesn't mean they haven't considered North Texas. Just in the phrasing of the answer, they did not highlight them as a team that they looked at compared to the other ones. Could have just forgotten to mention them, but it is interesting to look at it from that angle.
Absolutely. And, some of the other angles that they're taking on this is kind of crazy, too. Like, Miami is 15, despite two teams that it had beat being in the playoff. And it kind of, again, that head-to-head metric that we keep talking about and how much does it, how much does the weight come into play where Miami beat Notre Dame and they are still rewarding Notre Dame for
They
having
beat
Miami
USF
on their
too.
schedule.
Obviously, they're ranked ahead of them, but
And yeah, they're ranked ahead of them, but they are in the playoff, and Miami is, also in the
I
playoff. But like, it
Notre
just
Dame to
like,
me is solely making the playoff in the committee's eyes based off of brand. I think Miami has the better resume. They have the head-to-head win. I do not understand why Notre Dame is getting such a higher rating than Miami, despite I think Miami having a more impressive resume than Notre Dame. Notre Dame just has quality lessons, and that's what's keeping them afloat, and it's frustrating to watch. And I do want to take a little sidebar here. I did get the opportunity to go to Miami this weekend for their homecoming game against Syracuse. It was a great time, a lot of fun, and I will say Hard Rock has the best stadium food I have ever had in my life. It smelled great in the concourse. The food was great. Had a great brisket sandwich, slice of pizza. Really impressive food. I would love for them to work on the atmosphere just a touch, but it was a really good game. Crowd was definitely into it, and they actually entered Ken Dorsey into their Ring of Honor. So shout out Ken Dorsey, national champion 2001. Back to the important stuff, though.
yeah.
Another thing
No, but
that
speaking of Miami is the ACC official football, the ACC football official Twitter account going on to Twitter to spit facts towards the committee, where they put up two blind resumes, and the first one being a head-to-head win, head-to-head loss, both having a 7-2 record. The team on the left being the head-to-head win, having 3 top 25 wins, 4 top 35 FPI wins. We don't care about FPI. And their strength of record being 17. The other team having the head-to-head loss, 7-2 record, 1 top 25 win, 1 top 35 FPI win with a strength of record being 13. And the ACC football account asked, who do you got? Let's just look at some facts. Then later they quoted it. Team A, of course, is Miami. Who's Team B? Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, like, how much do the numbers that they're looking at come into play? But we're obviously seeing that brand is outweighing those numbers.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a rough thing, because you look at a Miami where they haven't been super consistent lately, and it's not helping their case. But if you're looking at the cold hard stats and the facts, there's not really much of a reason for Notre Dame to be above them.
No, and what the playoff commissioner said on this evening's show was that they've looked at Miami's offensive consistency, and that's really hurt them. And that was his reasoning on why they've been disfavored in that sense. I don't agree with the reasoning. I think that head-to-head matters. They have an overall better resume. They're essentially getting knocked because their eye test isn't passing isn't passing over the cold hard facts, which is really frustrating. Looking at the 12-team playoff here, though, right off rip, 5 SEC teams in the field. You know they're going to try to squeeze as many of them as they can get in. Last year they only got 3, and you know that made ESPN just ravenous with what they really wanted from a money standpoint. So,
but they didn't even go far.
Nope. You got and the one that went the furthest, Big 12 transplant. It's hilarious to look at all these teams say, oh, the Big 12 sucks, this and that. Well, dude, you just had a team in Texas last year make it to the SEC title game, make the furthest run out of any SEC team, and they couldn't even win the conference that you are saying is so bad in the Big 12. So, to me, that really proves that the parity in college football is a lot closer than what people say. But they have Bama, A&M, Ole Miss, and Georgia in here. I will say these teams are good teams. I don't think they all should be in here. I'm not as high on the SEC. Obviously, we have 4 of their teams in there, so we clearly think that they have some good teams, but they're really being rewarded for, teams like Vandy still being ranked all the way up at 14. Vandy's a good team. I just don't think they should be as high as 14 here. And, we obviously have Texas at a high ranking as well, and maybe they're just not being punished enough for that Florida loss, which is frustrating. But it's the world we live in, and I think an interesting point was there's been a lot of conversation with A&M and You saw Lane Kiffin, I mean, drinking the SEC Kool-Aid, even though he coaches Ole Miss, saying A&M should be ranked number one. It is what it is, but there is a real discussion for A&M to be ranked that high, and the committee did say that they gave Indiana the edge for that number 2 spot because of their defensive efficiency. They did admit it was really close between those two teams, but they're leaving it with A&M. If A&M wins out, they will be either the 1 or 2, though.
Absolutely. As I say, it's up to A&M at this point to how high of a seed they want to be. If they win out, that 1 seed is almost guaranteed. They're going to try and give the SEC winner that 1 seed to prop themselves up even more because it's ESPN. And so it's insane how someone like a Lane Kiffin, where he's so, sometimes he's extremely likable and then he goes and says some dumb shit like that, and it just makes him the worst person in the world. Where, in the what game was it? I don't remember what game it was, but that one defensive player that was talking shit to him, and he called him out while he was doing his interview.
Yeah,
it was funny. It was great.
Was
and then, it was great. And then the whole thing with his daughter dating the LSU linebacker,
Whit Weeks.
Weeks. Yeah, Whit Weeks. And, it's hilarious. Like, he's a fun watch. And then right when this playoff conversation starts, he's the most insufferable person in the world, where he's drinking the SEC Kool-Aid, where it's just constantly SEC this, SEC that. And, last season he was really pushing for Ole Miss to be in there when they absolutely had no reason to be around it. And, this year, a little different because they're a better team and they have looked a lot better, and they have their quality wins and some quality lessons. So, this season, absolutely, but, you're sitting here propping up another SEC team while you're in the SEC fighting for the SEC. Get out of here, man. No. Fight for your team.
I don't cheer for my rivals. I'm sorry.
Yeah, fight for your team. You don't sit there and say Texas A&M should be one. You say, no,
he's trying
Ole Miss
to prop
should
up
be
A&M
whatever.
to make Ole Miss better. Just prop up your own team, man. I don't get it. And it's
I don't even get it. It doesn't make sense because they don't even play each other. So they would only play each other if they ended up in the conference championship game, and that's not looking likely either. So it's one of those things that just doesn't make sense. I'm all for trying to make yourself and your team, possibly your conference, look better, but when it comes to doing it as much as he is, where he's defending other teams, really doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. And before we jump into our games this week, 2 talking points I want to talk to you about, Tony. The first is the all-important ACC title race that we've talked about. This is going to be a really big deciding factor. It's talked a lot about on this week's college football rankings show, where Duke and Georgia Tech are the teams that control their own destiny. Duke is 5-4. If they run the table and go 9-4, they win the ACC. There is a small possibility, small but real, that 2 group of 5 teams get in if JMU wins out and one of the American teams wins out. Could be your Green Wave. Real chance that a Duke ACC champ is ranked below those teams, and that means the ACC might not even get an at-large bid and be left out completely, which to me is ironic because the wording is not for power teams and a group of 5 conference champion. It's just the 5 highest rated champions wording that the power teams wanted, and now the ACC could be punished for it. Now Miami, they could continue to win out, not make the ACC title game, and then proceed to get an at-large bid. But you could see 2 group of 5 representatives get in, depending on how this goes, if the ACC continues to beat itself up. And you and I know, are huge Duke fans the rest of the season.
And I absolutely hate Duke in every way, shape, and form.
You and me both, man.
But it's so hard to not cheer for them, because with them running the table, it makes Tulane's resume look better, saying that, look, we beat the ACC champs.
That's what JMU wants with Louisville in that sense, too.
Exactly.
But Duke winning would help JMU if we win out.
Exactly. In that sense of, if Duke were to win out, with their record being what it is, a 4-loss team, there's no way that they get ranked higher than a Tulane or a JMU if they win their conference. You would think, but with you never know with the committee. Yeah, you never know with the committee what their decision making is. I think they would rather kill themselves than put 2 G5s in.
Oh my gosh! The Twitter arguments would go feral. The
Twitter would blow up.
College football is the only college sport where Cinderella stories are tarnished, not cherished, and it is the most ridiculous thing. I've never seen a sport try so hard to put the little guy down so that they don't get an opportunity.
It's insane because we had talked about it where it's the exact opposite when it comes to college basketball, where it doesn't matter who you're a fan of. When you see those Cinderella stories, you love it. And it's great, and you prop them up, and you want it to be successful because that's what makes the game great. But as soon as you put on cleats and you head to the football field, it's like, no, screw you guys. You guys don't deserve anything. It's ridiculous. So
it's so frustrating. And
maybe
you go ahead.
Just maybe if we can finally get something to fall our way one time, if a Duke were to win out and possibly be ranked lower than 2 G5 champs, and maybe that can go and it could show that it's a legit thing if one of them goes and does their job and gets the job done on the road. More than likely going to a P4 at large is the more than likely outcome if it were to happen. To go on the road and get something done like that would shake up the college football landscape as a whole, saying like, yeah, screw you guys, we did deserve this.
They would 100% be expanding the playoff to make sure more teams get in. And I think this perfectly leads into my next topic of the group of 5 playoff race. This poll really set the tone, I think, for me on who's in the driver's seat, and that is clearly USF. If they win out, they will get in. And for me, on a personal note from JMU, it definitely means that we do not control our own destiny. Even if we win out, knock on wood, we got to go 1-0 each week. But if JMU were to win out and be 12-1, an 11-2 USF would get in over them, who controls their own destiny. It's very interesting to see, and I think JMU specifically is in a troublesome spot. Even if they go 12-1 and USF stumbles, I could see a 11-2 Tulane getting in over them potentially. I do think that UTSA loss would hurt you all, but I could see Tulane gets another big win against a USF or a Navy or North Texas. Well, that boosts them more. Even if JMU wins their conference and let's say hypothetically, we hate that, but faces a 10-2 Southern Miss team, that's a great win, and ODU finishes 9-3. I could see JMU right now being the second highest rated group of 5 team. USF stumbles, but then a North Texas or Tulane or Memphis somehow hurdles JMU because they get that win against the other American team.
Yeah, and a big thing I saw was after the Tulane-Memphis game, when the score was final, they had put on the screen the percentage of the chance by percentage of making that 5th spot. And JMU was first, but the next 3 teams were American teams, the AAC teams. And what I think a lot of people were failing to realize is that's basically saying that they have, over a 50% chance of that American champ being in over
because
JMU.
One of those teams is going to win, and they're just going to continue to get a higher percentage.
Exactly.
Right now, the odds are showing JMU has a great chance, but I think reality is that they are on the outside looking in, unfortunately. But you can only control the games 1 week at a time, and that's what JMU needs to do. But I think this highlights the issue of college football is the only college sport where conference champions aren't rewarded with a shot at the playoff. it would be a crime if a 12-1 JMU does not get a chance to make the playoff. Hell, it'd be a crime if 11-2 Southern Miss team didn't get a chance, and it'd be a crime if an ACC champ like an 11-2 Tulane, 11-2 USF, 12-1 Navy, 12-1, or excuse me, 11-2 Navy, 12-1 North Texas. One of those teams is going to miss the playoff, and it will be a shame for whatever team, whatever champion between the Sun Belt and the American doesn't get in. It will be a shame, because those teams deserve a shot to play for the title.
I mean, shit, you could throw in a Mountain West team in there as well.
Yeah, you really could.
You could throw in a Boise State. I mean, San Diego State just lost pretty badly to Hawaii, but they still only have 2 losses. So, I mean, there's still quite a bit out there in the G5 race, and I hate that the wording is the top 5 ranked conference champions. And this year could be the year that wording bites them in the butt. Mm-hmm. But we all know realistically they think about it as the P4 and then 1 G5. Mm-hmm. Even though the wording is technically different, and I will stay on it. Yes, it is made up terms, absolutely made up. But that's more than likely when they're sitting there in their room talking about it, they say P4, they say G5.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's how it's labeled. I understand it, it's terminology, but I just want to say that, let's say Duke has this miracle run. They finish 9-4. To me, it is just as big of a tragedy if a 9-4 Duke team doesn't get a chance to play for the national championship as a 12-1 JMU or an American Conference champ, a Mountain West Conference champ, a Sun Belt champ, whoever it might be. It would be a shame to not be rewarded for winning your conference, and it's just a really hard thing to do. And looking at this G5 playoff race, it is really going to be interesting down these couple weeks. And speaking of the G5 playoff race, let's talk about 2 games that are going to be important for it. The Tulane game against FAU and JMU at App State. From a JMU perspective, man, do I want revenge for these past 2 years. I will never forget walking out of a silent Bridgeforth after game day a pair of years ago and losing in overtime in the way we did after an incredible run. It was an insane game. And then last year, we go to App State, should have beat them. They kicked our ass, and then their fans are throwing snowballs at us. It was some really annoying type of stuff to do and deal with. So I really want revenge. App State's never an easy out. JMU's a 20-point favorite, which scares the ever-living shit out of me. But I've said it once, I'll say it again. The mission is simple: win. And you do that behind Alonzo Barnett, who has been one of the best quarterbacks in college football the last month, and Wayne Knight, who, shout out to Wayne, he's always a dog, and he's a finalist for the Paul Hornick Award, which goes to the most versatile player in college football. He's 3rd in the nation for his average on all-purpose yards per game. These 2 are the guys that got to will the offense week in and week out, and they've been playing lights out. So this is a huge game for JMU to keep that ball rolling. They cannot let the rat poison in, and Alonzo Barnett said it best himself. The mindset is simple: kill.
Absolutely. That's probably just about every G5 team right now is go out there and get it done. Because same with the Green Wave going against FAU in their homecoming game, where they're wearing their beautiful City Edition uniforms, possibly uniform of the week. I'm going to go ahead and say it is the uniform of the week because they are just beautiful. But yeah, this is of course a major game, just in the sense that if the team was watching that selection show and they found out that they are being talked about, they are being considered, you have to go out there and get it done. And what I'm really watching for here is ride the momentum, man. They have got to take what they did against Memphis and run with it. Do not look back. Do not go. Just go with it. Get it done. Don't let FAU hang in whatsoever. If you're up a score or 2, get up 2 more scores.
Yes.
Get up 3
winning
more
by
scores.
How you win matters. So you need to keep
exactly.
You can't let up the gas. You got to keep hammering it home for both of our teams here.
Absolutely, and that was a point I was going to make is win and win by a lot, because that is being taken into consideration when it comes to these games now. Where if that's a deciding factor of we beat FAU by 50, you beat App State by 49. If that's 1 point is the deciding factor, then that's the deciding factor. So you can't leave it up to that decision where they weigh the possibility of other things. Go get it done quickly and thoroughly. I mean, that Memphis game, they were up big and they let off, and I hate that. And every sport possible, in the couple years that I had coached, I was always a proponent of get it done and do not stop. I am never ever going to let up on the gas. I am going to put throttle on it and go. I'm going to kick them while they're down, because that's the only way to set the precedence. No one wants to sit there and lollygag and churn some clock, run the ball 3 times, punt, maybe get a first down. No, go get it done. Go score a couple more times.
If you don't want me to score, stop me. I've always been a believer in that as well.
Absolutely. And for me, it's going to come down to, of course, Jake Retzlaff yet again. Last week I had said possible controversy, with him getting benched, but then he goes and shuts me up immediately and just balls out against Memphis, opening up the game with an absolute bomb to Shaz Preston. And that set the tone. And they took it, they ran with it. He ended up in that game alone, 332 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's got to do it again, and it's going to help. He's going to get his help from his wide receiver core, which is very much a core by committee. They really don't have that standout, wide receiver one, which they have capable wide receiver ones like a Shaz Preston, a former 5-star at Alabama, and he's very capable. But Retzlaff's safety blanket has been Bryce Bohannon, who has ended up with the most receiving yards at the end of that game for Tulane with 101 on 4 catches. And the big thing with this wide receiver core is the big shot plays are finally starting to fall. They're getting those long completions, some of them running up in the end zone, some of them are setting themselves up in the red zone where they're finally getting it done. So I need to see more of that. The defense has got to play complete yet again with this FAU team who loves to throw the ball, with their quarterback having over just about 2,600 yards right now. So they're going to chuck the ball, especially if we get up early. So the defense has got to play solid again, force a turnover too, and just put the stamp on it, put the nail in the coffin, get it done, get out.
Every game is big for our teams down this stretch, and none bigger than the game that is next, and that's App State and FAU for us. And it's going to be a good weekend of college football for sure, and that's going to start with our games to watch this week. These are the best games, the 6 best games. What we're doing is 1 for every power conference, 1 group of 5, and then 1 pick of our choosing. And the first game we want to highlight is number 21. This is our Dummies rankings, going on the road to take on the Navy at 12 p.m. on Saturday. As we've talked about for the group of 5, these have some massive playoff implications. I think JMU and Tulane fans are probably cheering for Navy here. I know I am. USF and Navy can control their own destinies when it comes to the American as well. The American has such a tight race, and it's going to be a huge game. USF hasn't won at Navy in, I believe, the last 2 trips they've played. They haven't played that well on the road this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how Navy can bounce back after that rough game against Notre Dame and losing to North Texas the week before that. They could be facing a 3-game skid.
Absolutely. And we said it earlier before they started this rough stretch of, this is where we find out what this Navy team is. We've seen with these past 2 losses that it's just not the same. So, it's going to be rough for them. I think it's going to be a good game regardless. Like you had said, USF not doing too hot on the road this season, barring that, North Texas game. But if they get out to a quick start, I think it gets ugly for Navy quick. Byron Brown is still as electric as he's been, absolutely just carrying this USF team and just putting the world on notice with him. He is still just as good as he was in the first couple of weeks when they were in everyone's eyesight. And now that the highlight is back on them being in the playoff, can they live up to the limelight, and can he keep it going? So it's going to be, USF is going to have to go in there. They're going to have to do their job as well because right now Navy is ahead of them technically in the standings for the American, and so is No, I don't think North Texas. I think they are actually.
There's a bunch of teams with one loss within the conference, so it's a bottleneck.
It's very close. They're all within each other. The difference is very minuscule, but it's gonna be a tough one regardless. And this is a chance for Navy to play spoiler and put themselves in the race.
For sure, it's going to be big for Navy if they can get their quarterback Blake Horvath back. He left North Texas that game early, did not play last week against Notre Dame. His status is still a little up in the air. I think he's trending towards playing, which will be a huge help for Navy. I think him playing really helps them out.
Absolutely. He is a game wrecker. He is a very good quarterback. He's good. He can throw the ball, believe it or not. I know they don't do it often, but he can absolutely throw the ball. So a QB battle between him and Byron Brown would be fun to watch. So with all that being said, who do you got?
This is a tough one for me. I've gone with Navy because I needed them to win in the past, and they just couldn't do it for me. I think this is a little contingent on Horvath playing. I think if he plays, Navy's got a great chance. And I'm going to go with the midshipmen here. I am going to ride with the Navy. I think, no pun intended, they have the firepower if Horvath plays.
I'm with you there. I think it's very, very contingent on if Horvath is playing. But I think even with him playing, I think USF just has enough to really get it done. They've shown that they are a powerhouse. When they run into these teams in the American, they usually are showing that they are levels above them, minus the Memphis game, which was a very good game. And Memphis did, get the win that they deserved in that game. But, I think that USF is still just on another level, and, they take these losses on the chin and they run with it. So I think they get it done.
I understand your sound logic there, and I hope you're wrong for my sake.
Me too, honestly. Me too.
Looking at our next game here, out of the Big 12, TCU heading to BYU Saturday night, 10:15 p.m. BYU looking to bounce back after that really rough performance against Texas Tech. Their offense just could not get anything going. They couldn't slow down the Red Raiders. And TCU's looking to shake up the Big 12 and, potentially knock the Big 12 out of getting 2 playoff spots here. And quarterback Bear Brockmeyer, we've mentioned him a lot this year for BYU, is gonna look to bounce back and try to ball out for him at home in a bounce back game.
Absolutely, BYU needs this more than they need air at this rate because they cannot afford another loss if they want to try and get that at-large bid. If they can't get it done in the conference championship game, if they make it. So this is going to be massive for them. Again, being at home, I think, is going to help. That crowd is going to reinvigorate this team and get them out there ready to play. And I think BYU is going to look at themselves and be like, that wasn't us last week. Mm-mm. It was a rough crowd. Always hard going into a place like Lubbock and on a game day nonetheless where they have that energy and they're just like it just really was Texas Tech was set up for success. Everything was going their way. And, their defense did look great, Texas Tech, and BYU's just looked almost a little out of place there. And, I was a proponent that BYU's defense would be enough, but, hopefully this is their lesson that they take and just run with it and continue to go. So TCU, but, they're not just another team. They're a very good team. They're coming off of a tough loss to Iowa State that, some people thought that they were gonna, get it done. And
they probably would have bettered my rankings if they hadn't choked that game. TCU is a good team.
They just rolled over in that game. I mean, they had almost double the total yards that Iowa State had. They were up 17-6 in the fourth quarter and just blew it. And it just did not. I don't know what happened, what caused it. Obviously the 2 turnovers from the quarterback doesn't help. The 3 turnovers in total doesn't help. But, this is something that they're going to look at, and they're probably going to be just as fired up going into this game like BYU, because this is a bounce back for both of them, because, TCU, albeit probably out of consideration when it comes to the Big 12 at this rate, but they know that they can play the spoiler for BYU, who's coming off of the loss.
If TCU wants to pull off this upset, it will come down to the arm of quarterback Josh Hoover, who has been lighting it up for them. He has thrown nearly for 2,700 yards, 23 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. He has been really good this year. So if TCU is going to pull this off, he's got to lead them to victory. And with that being said, Tony, who do you got in this one?
This is going to be a rough one. I mean, it's going to be closer than I think most people think, but I think BYU gets it done. I think they've proven to themselves and to everyone that they are a strong team, and I think obviously running into a now healthy Texas Tech team that seems to be on top of the world with how they've built that team. But BYU is showing that they are still very much in contention, and I think they're going to look to get themselves back into that conference championship game to try and exact revenge on Texas Tech.
I agree with you. I think BYU is going to get this done. I think BYU is a very good team, and I think that they're going to have a strong bounce back. Their home crowd over there in Utah is always packed, and by Utah I mean the state, not the school. So I think BYU is going to get this done behind a rocking crowd here. And looking at this next game, number 20 USC is at home against Iowa. This is obviously a ranked matchup according to the committee, not so much us. Saturday at 3:30 in Cali. USC to me has looked really good this year, and they're not fully out of this playoff picture, and they could still have a shot at the Big Ten title.
Absolutely. USC, they had their early season slip ups with some losses that they took, but they're still very much in this race right now. According to the standings, they are third in the Big Ten, so just above Oregon. And I mean, I don't know what decides that, how there's a tiebreaker. Don't know. Don't ask me. But that's where they're at. And, that, helps you a lot more than it hurts you, seeing where Oregon's at. And, if they can continue to win and get these conference wins against, a committee ranked team as well, that only boosts you in the metric eye. So USC is very much in consideration still for that at-large bid. And if they continue to win out and, someone slips up like an Ohio State, like an Indiana, if they slip up, there's that possibility that they might sneak in somehow. So, they could very much send a message here and show that they are still a threat in the Big Ten, and they should be getting consideration here.
It's really their chance to send a message. They have an opportunity this week against Iowa, next week against Oregon, and then ending the year against UCLA. They have a chance with 3 games here to get 3 wins and really potentially flip the script on the Big Ten here. And as much as I like this Iowa team, I just don't think they're good enough to run the table. I don't like their odds, and I think they're gonna struggle on the road against USC. And to spoil who I'm picking here, I am going to go with the Trojans. I have been in favor of at-home Big Ten teams when they have to travel across country from the Midwest out to Cali or vice versa. I'm gonna rock with the Trojans with this one mainly because of that.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you here. I think with you there with the travel being a big thing, and with Iowa specifically, I thought last weekend against Oregon was their best chance to solidify themselves and prove to themselves that they can hang. And even when things were looking in their favor that game, they still couldn't get it done. And I think that's just going to kind of be deflating to them. And then having to turn around and then travel to California the next week is just going to make it even harder. So I'm with you there where I think USC just gets it done at home I'm not going to say pretty handedly, but they get it done, quite good.
I agree with you every point there. And looking at this next game, College Game Day is visiting 15 Notre Dame traveling to number 25 Pittsburgh Saturday at noon. Game days back in town. And there's been a lot of talk, especially from Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi, that this game doesn't really mean anything to Pitt. It doesn't affect their path to the ACC, which he is right about. This game, in the sense of Pitt's chance at the playoff berth, I don't think they're getting an at-large bid at this point, but they could win the ACC and get a berth that way. He's not wrong, but I can't believe he said this at a press conference. I just think that sends the wrong message to your team. It's the wrong mindset. I don't want a coach that's thinking this game doesn't matter. I want a coach that's thinking I want to kill the opposing team across from me. And maybe that's a little aggressive. Not kill, but, kick their ass.
No, I'm with you. Where when I saw that he had said that, I was baffled. What do you mean you don't care if you lose 100-10? What? Who says that about their own team? It doesn't make any sense. If I'm a player, I'm looking at that, and I'm like, "What the hell is wrong with you, coach?" Like,
dude, oh my gosh!
So we can go out there. We can go out there and we can just walk out there and just not do anything, and you'll be totally okay with it. Like, no, that's stupid. Game day's coming to our home. We get this massive crowd against another ranked team that would absolutely boost your resume if you were to win. I mean, you could end Notre Dame's season on Saturday.
Yes. I think that Notre Dame would certainly be eliminated.
It's like, why are we just why are we just brushing it to the side? Like, oh, it doesn't really matter. I mean, he's basically saying, like, yeah, they're a lock anyway, so who cares what we do? We're just worried about ourselves and getting to the ACC. Like, no, like, winning boosts you so much. Mm-hmm. Like, it would help you drastically to the point where, like, they're right now, according to the committee, they are 22, where I think a win, puts them possibly into that first two out category where, or possibly like a 13 slot where if they get a win, against the Notre Dame team, like, that helps drastically. So I don't know. The fact that a coach is willing to say that about his own team makes zero sense. And I'm hoping the players don't take it seriously or take it to heart because, as much as I'm a eat shit Pitt person, I want Notre Dame to lose. I want them to lose because, again, I think they're getting in based off brand. So I think they're, a cancer to college football right now in the sense of being independent because they want to hide behind their contract with NBC. But, it's stupid. That's a whole other, debate for another day. But it's going to bank off of course, the quarterback, Mason Heinschel.
Yes, true freshman.
Okay.
Took over for Eli
he took
Holstein.
Over. Yep. And it seemed to work out pretty good for them so far with them getting the wins that they need. But they're going to have to try and stop C.J. Carr and Jeremiah Love, which are you could argue two of the best players in the nation right now with how they're playing. Especially Jeremiah Love, he has just been on fire as of recently, and so it's going to be a tough day for Pitt here at home.
I agree, and they're going to have to stop C.J. Carr, Jeremiah Love, like you said, and that's never an easy task. So it's going to be a really tough game for Pitt, and I don't like their coach's mindset going into it. With all that being said, who do you got?
As much as the coach is going to say it, and he's been saying that it doesn't matter, I think it does matter. And I think Pitt gets it done at home. I think they ride off of that high of game day being there with Pat McAfee being home. It's going to just reinvigorate that team, and they're just going to go crazy. And, I think it's going to be a very close game. I don't think they completely stop C.J. Carr and Jeremiah Love, but they, hold them to a reasonable amount to where it keeps the game tight, and they just maybe eke it out, last second field goal or get a good stop at the end of the game. But I think Pitt gets it done, but barely.
I really want to agree with you and ride with Pitt here, but part of me can never cheer for Pitt, and I do want Notre Dame to lose because I don't think they should be in the playoff right now, and they're overranked. However, I think their coach saying that does matter, and solely because Narduzzi is saying that this game doesn't matter and they could lose by 100. I think Notre Dame's going to steamroll them. If you are already talking about that mindset, and you're given bulletin board material, maybe behind closed doors he's saying something different to his players, but I don't like the message he's sending, and because of that, I think the Fighting Irish are going to walk into Pittsburgh and, quite frankly, embarrass them behind C.J. Carr and Jeremiah Love.
That's not a that's not crazy to say, honestly. So, I mean, but I you could see that, that material being used against Notre Dame where they go in thinking like, oh, they're not even going to bother to play. But, we'll have to wait and see come Saturday. But our next game here that is a must-watch is our SEC one. As much as we don't like them, they still have some pretty damn good games. And this week they have number 18 Oklahoma traveling to number 5 Alabama.
3:30 kickoff here with huge playoff implications. And this is where you start talking about, will a quality loss for either team actually end up helping them? OU is sitting out on the outside looking in for the SEC title, but they're in the mix for the at-large. Gives Alabama a chance to have a statement win, but Alabama loses. That's just another quality loss for the Crimson Tide here in the SEC. So I think this is a game that it's going to be a great game, but I think in the long run, it's going to frustrate us because of the implications it has for their resumes.
Absolutely, and I've been almost. I don't think I've said it on record, but it really feels like that the consensus thought on Alabama is that they're undefeated. Like people are just completely disregarding. That's what I'm saying. Like they're not. I feel like a lot of people are just disregarding that loss to Florida State where it was ugly. I mean, it wasn't close at all, and it seems like a loss for Alabama here almost does nothing, and like they could still very much be a top team and like still get that. They're still easily going to get that at-large bid because they're not going to forget to include Alabama this year, and they would still have that chance.
Yeah, they could still win
exactly. So. They could still absolutely be in the run for the SEC title, and if they were to end up losing, it would make my life a hell of a lot harder trying to rank these teams. Having a triangle of death sorts of thing or a giant circle of who beat who, so it almost have to just be like just close my eyes and put someone somewhere. But this is going to be a massive game for the SEC as a whole, and then obviously with the playoff implications for it. And, it's going to come down to I think it's going to come down to quarterback play per usual, is more specifically for Oklahoma. And John Mateer, I mean, again, since he's come back, he still hasn't gotten to that true form where he was that, Heisman, almost front runner, where it was like, this is his to lose. And since he's come back, it's, been a little lackluster, a few flashes here and there, but not the John Mateer that we were, kind of high on.
He definitely has not looked like the same player from before the injury, and he is going to be a key for Oklahoma if they want to pull off this upset against Bama on the road. So it's going to be huge for them if they can do this. And quite frankly, I don't think Alabama's hurt too much with a loss, unfortunately, and that's just the way it goes. And Oklahoma has a chance to really jump up into this playoff conversation for us, but also how close they are in the rankings. And I'm curious to know, Tony, who are you riding with for this game?
Oh man, this is another tough one here where, I think Oklahoma is capable. I think they could possibly get it done, but I think Alabama is just too hot for them right now, where they have just not looked back since that first loss. Yes, they do have a loss, people believe it or not. And I think Alabama just gets it done at home and just kind of takes Oklahoma out of the conversation and just kind of puts them to bed and says, this is still our conference and we're still going to rule it.
I agree with you. I think Alabama is going to get this one done. I don't think Oklahoma is the team they were at the beginning of the year, and Alabama's just looked really good. I think that they're going to get the job done at home this Saturday.
Absolutely, and it's I think it could end up being very close, and maybe if John Mateer can play that Superman, that hero ball, maybe we get something. But that tends to bite people in the butt. Just ask Josh Allen. But moving on to our next game here, we do have unfortunately another SEC team or matchup, but it is nonetheless a good one because it does also have massive implications here. With number 13 Texas traveling to number 7 Georgia in the primetime slot on Saturday.
Another game where you have the quality loss conversation, especially for Georgia. I think if Texas gets a third loss, it's going to be real hard for them to make the playoff, but I wouldn't be surprised if they sneak them in. I think if Georgia loses, that's honestly best case scenario for the SEC, and same if Alabama loses, because now they just have more and more teams stacking their way up into this top of the ratings here. A quality loss for Georgia, they only got one right now to Bama. They won't drop that far, and I think Texas, if they keep it close, they're still going to be in that conversation, but a bad performance could knock them out, and they've definitely looked better of late, as we saw from earlier in the season.
Absolutely. I mean, Texas has slowly but surely grown into a better team. As much as I hate to say it, I'm not a Texas fan, and it's going to be one of those ones where, again, a loss for Georgia doesn't hurt them too drastically, but they'll still, they still probably drop, a couple slots here and there. Texas would obviously move up and solidify themselves. But, again, I think like you had said, an ugly loss for Texas, I think puts them out, stomps them out. They're done. Just same with Oklahoma. If, they get an ugly loss, it could stomp them out as well. But, knowing the committee, they'll find a way to keep them ranked somehow, so they still keep stacking these ranked wins. And it increases that strength of schedule, strength of record, whatever stupid metrics they want to use. But, it's always going to come down to Arch and how he's going to play. Is he going to play, sort of scared, a little hesitant? We all know that Kirby is super aggressive with his defense. He's a very defensive man, and I'm sure he has been licking at his chops trying to get at Arch this whole week. And has been looking forward to this so that he can just get it done and shut down Arch and show that he is, a great defensive mind. Who knows, maybe he'll clap or call a timeout or something. Who knows, we'll have to see. But, Texas needs to have a complete game on all three sides of the ball to really have any sort of chance here. I think Georgia is a very good team, but I think they have, potential to slip up here and there. They have had some games where it's a little closer than they would think or they would want it to be.
Squeaking out a few wins here and there, for sure.
Exactly. So I think, this could be one of those games where, it is ranked. It's a highly matchup, but, Texas hasn't shown that they are a, spectacular team all season. But, Georgia could be going into this thinking like this should be easy, and it turns out to be one of their harder games. So it's definitely – I don't want to say it's screaming trap game because I don't want to say it's going to be labeled as a trap game, but I think it's going to be –
This isn't necessarily a trap, but yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's not trap territory. It's definitely something that should not be underestimated.
I 100% agree. And, honestly, I think Arch has kind of gotten a bad rap. He did have a rough start to the season, but – you can never live up to the amount of hype that he had. He's actually had a fairly good statistical season. He's bounced back well. But I agree that he has not handled pressure, defensive pressure, not, metaphoric pressure, just straight up defensive pressure that well this year. He still kind of gets a little skittish in the pocket. And I think quarterback play is going to be a big difference between this. And I think Gunnar Stockton has a good chance to lead the Bulldogs to victory here. And with that being said, Tony, I'm curious to know, who do you think is going to walk out of Athens with this huge SEC matchup?
As much as I think it's going to be a tough decision, I don't even think it really is. I think Georgia gets it done pretty handedly. I'll say pretty handedly for this one. I think Texas gets fraud checked. Georgia snatches their chain and says it's fake. So, the typical stuff in the SEC, they might, drive really fast out of there in the typical Georgia sense. But, I think they definitely drive Texas out of the playoff conversation and just really stomp them and just show that they shouldn't be as high as they are. This could be even said to myself where I have them, I have them at 12, but like I said, it was purely because of other people losing and how the cookie crumbled. But yeah, I think Georgia just gets it done at home. I think they're just going to show that they are just too much for Texas.
I honestly, I agree with you here. I do think Georgia is the better team. I think they're more well-rounded. I think they're a little bit better coached. However, I'm going to go with the Longhorns here. I think this game's going to turn ugly. I think both of these teams are just going to play an ugly style of football for some reason. And I think Texas is going to find a way to squeak this one out. I could see this game going to overtime, and I could see Texas making the stop defensively that holds on to the game for them. This game is a coin toss, though, for me. I think it's either going to be Georgia winning by a landslide or Texas winning by the thinnest of margins.
No, I see where your head's at, and I never thought you'd ever agree with this sort of sense, but I'm going
no,
horns
it's
down.
always horns down. But
It's always horns down, always horns down. So don't give me a 15-yard penalty. But yeah, I think it. I agree with you in the sense that it could get very ugly, but I'd almost want to say that favors Georgia in the slightest, purely because they're built for that ugly, and it's just it just seems to be how they're getting stuff done recently. So I think that could possibly play into their favor. But it's another week of crazy games, so everything is up for grabs. Teams that aren't supposed to win or end up winning, and vice versa and whatnot. But let us know what you guys think about these games. Who's going to come out on top? Who's going to kill their playoff hopes? Who's going to boost their playoff hopes? Let us know what you think about our bracket. Who's too high, who's too low, who deserves a little shout out, who's not getting the flowers that they deserve. Follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Dynasty Dumbies. Feel free to follow our personal Twitter accounts as well at Hunter_Shaw5 and at CronyTony20. And we will see you all next week after this great slate of games.
See you all next week.